This is the Get You Some Productions podcast, episode 93. Usually, we're a podcast, well, we're always a podcast covering everything from everything related to music production, from the first note to the last fan. So, as long as it's music related, the production of music, the performance of music, we joke about how we talk about what's appropriate to wear on stage. We can talk about fans that we love and fans that are annoying. It's everything, as long as it's music related, it's all good. It's everything related to music production from the first note to the last fan. Quick plug. So my partner, Dan Kutcher, may or may not be joining us, like I told you before, mid stream. So hopefully he will, because he's my comedy partner. He makes everything funnier, but I'll try. And sometimes these shows are an actual business meeting between Dan and I, where we figure out how to run a business or how to do a podcast or how to have a music production company. We just sort of do it in full public view. And oftentimes we don't know what we're doing. We try to figure it out in real time, and people get to watch us try to figure it out. But we have been doing a lot of interviews, which we love doing because it takes a lot of pressure off of us. So today we have Katarzyna Sadej, and you are a opera singer, right? And our connection is that we both went to Bard, right? And Dan went to Bard as well. So today's an interview, and so what I'm going to do is we're going to get into your story first. So actually, we sort of actually partially this podcast is actually kind of like selfish on our part because we want to network with people, we want to meet people, and so for me, I'm just meeting you. We just happen to be meeting in public, so everybody can watch us meet.
Yeah.
But so I want to know about you. I want to know about you, like your life, growing up, how you got into music, So and everyone else who's watching this wants to know as well, because we're all human beings. We're all trying to live on this planet together. So we love hearing each other's stories. So that's my first question. Tell us your story.
So my whole life story.
You don't have to. You can talk. You can make it as long or short as you want. But this is a podcast. It's a long form.
That's true. That's true. So we have lots of time.
Yeah, you can. I do have a cutoff at 2.
Okay.
So, but don't let that stop you, because we can always do another show.
Okay, perfect. Well, and then feel free to ask me questions as I'm talking.
Okay.
Or if I pause, because maybe I'll get lost in my own story. But yes, I'm an opera singer. A classical singer, I guess, is the proper term, because technically people say opera singer because of the style of singing that you do professionally. But technically the term should be classical singer, because we don't only perform in operas, but also in concert, in recitals, and not simply in like that play where there's music that we know as opera, but also in concert form as well.
Thank you for correcting me, because this is my ignorance.
But I usually tell people I'm an opera singer anyway, because it's just easier. People understand, oh, that's when you go, oh, and you sing that way. Hopefully I sing better than I just showed. Now, I was born in Poland, and it was communist at the time. So my father, he was an athlete at the time and an Olympian. And because of the communist regime. He actually didn't get his second chance at an Olympic Games. And he was one of the favorites in judo, the sport known as judo. And really, that was sort of the last straw for him. He always hated the communist regime, but because that happened, he decided, I'm going to take my family to Canada so that we could have a better life. And so we immigrated through Berlin. We went from East Berlin to West Berlin. East Berlin was also communist at the time. And we lived in Berlin for about 11 months. And then we flew to Canada, where we started a new life as a family. And I was 5 years old at the time. And I grew up, without a lot. We were immigrants. My parents didn't make a lot of money. And I never had the luxury of having like music lessons from a young age. I actually started singing lessons when I was 17, when I had my first job at a grocery store. And I paid for my own lessons. And then a year later, I auditioned to the University of Ottawa to try to get into the music program. And I was sure at the time that I wouldn't get in because my music theory background was so weak that I thought that there was no way I could get in. But I did get in based on the audition. So they let me in purely based on potential. And then that's sort of where my classical music story started. Before that, in high school, I was singing lots of Whitney Houston or Celine Dion, so I was doing a lot of pop singing. And then actually since then, because I had that self-learned background in pop music, I always continued to both teach and perform in other styles other than opera. And then I suppose that also is what allowed me to get into that vocals only original music, which we'll talk about a little bit later, because I use all of my styles of singing, all of my voices, so to speak, all the colors in my voice that I have available to me. I use those in my recordings of my original music as well. So once I graduated the University of Ottawa, I then went on to the University of Toronto, where I did my first master's degree in operatic performance. And then I went to Bard. I did a second master's. And the reason I chose to do the Bard program is because it wasn't purely based on opera, but on vocal performance in general. We got to work with a lot of living composers. So you do classical music, but it's actually composed by a composer that's sitting right next to you, working on the piece with you and writing it for your voice. We did a lot of concert work. So after those two master's degrees, I had a really well-rounded education in everything that entails vocal performance, let's say. Yeah.
Cool. So actually, let's go back because so when you were 17,
Mm-hmm.
you were 17 and then you decided you wanted to sing.
Yes.
Oh, but you were already singing because that's high school age. So you were already singing pop music and stuff like that and you liked it.
Yeah.
But then it was when you were 17 you decided, "Oh, I want to be a professional singer."
Yeah, okay, so in a totally random situation, actually. Yes, I loved singing pop music. I considered that I would want to be a pop singer even before I went into classical training. But then when I was 17, my sister's boyfriend at the time, who actually is her husband now, he was singing in a band, and he just randomly decided to share with me that he was seeing this teacher just for like 2 sessions, and that she's a classically trained singer, but she was really good for his technique. So he encouraged me, like, just go see her like once or twice, and like she might be able to tell you a couple things that will help you with your singing. So I went to see her, and yeah, she was like this beautiful soprano, classically trained voice. I was completely inspired by that sound. I had always loved listening to it on CDs, but I never thought that I could actually do it. And then when I saw her, I thought I was too old. She asked me, do you want to keep singing like that, pop style, or would you be interested in training your voice classically? And I said, aren't I too old for that? And she said, no, your vocal cords are actually mature now. So it's actually a very good time to start. Between the ages of 15 and 17 is actually a really good time because you're not risking that you'll hurt your vocal cords because they're not fully mature. So I started learning how to sing with her. I had a tiny bit of music theory training from her once she learned that I would actually audition to the University of Ottawa. She helped me with that a little bit, but it was literally like 2 months before I decided to audition. Like I was cramming all this music theory, in which like you just don't learn it that quickly, right?
Nope.
So yeah, but she helped me with the audition, of course, like so that I could get my voice up to par. And I think I did well in the audition. But I think for the music theory exams that they give you, I'm pretty sure I failed those. So I had to work really hard the first 2 years in my undergrad in order to catch up with people that had been, taking either piano lessons or singing in children's choirs from the age of like 5 or 6, right?
Hmm.
So I had to work very hard those
Most
first 2 years.
people most people who end up in those types of programs, especially for classical, they're kind of like trained from a young age.
Yeah.
Did I know that, was it growing up in Poland also, there's like a classical music sort of history there, and I think it's a very serious
Hmm.
attitude about music. Was that an influence? Like, because did that influence your idea that you were too late?
No, actually, not that, because my family, like I didn't really come from a musical family.
Mm,
So it's not like any of those like notions were in my mind. I
mhm,
simply thought that, like, because most people that do classical music, if they're pianists or violinists, like they do it from the age of 3 or 4 sometimes.
mhm,
So I assumed the same thing for that kind of high level of singing, that
mhm,
you would need to have done it from childhood. That
mhm.
was just something I assumed.
Yeah.
But now it's something I actually like take into account because I do a lot of vocal coaching myself.
Mhm,
And if parents approach me and the child is less than 12 years old, I'll usually tell them like I won't take them on. Like I want the vocal cords to be mature,
mhm,
or at least like ready for that kind of training. And it's a better idea actually to sign your young child up for piano lessons, violin, children's choir even, but
mhm,
not to like seriously train the voice, because it's actually potentially dangerous for the vocal cords.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to get into a whole like mechanics of singing thing, but I'm a singer,
Hmm.
but not a professional singer. I don't even know I'm a non-professional singer. I don't know. But
Hmm.
I've had a lot of issues with my vocal cords because I was in rock and roll bands for so long.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
didn't realize all the ways that I was abusing my voice
Hmm.
until I finally got, I sought out, some lessons by a guy named Per Bristow.
Okay.
And he taught me about how you make your vocal cords come together and apart. And it was not even something that I thought I would ever be able to control.
Hmm.
I thought, oh, it's just, it's involuntary. Now I'm
Hmm.
shocked that I can actually control it more, because I think what I was doing was I was singing so much with them too far apart,
Yeah.
and I
Too
was
much air.
forcing so much air through, and I ended up losing my voice. And then I had a band, and I was chronically losing my voice during
Yeah.
rehearsals. I wasn't able to get through an entire rehearsal. Now I'm better, but I still work on it a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And an interesting example of that is Axl Rose, like from Guns N' Roses. He had a fantastic instrument, and then just not exact proper use. And like you heard him probably like at the Grammys, like way later on in the Guns N' Roses career. But
Yeah.
he like just completely, like he has no voice left. And it's quite sad, right? Because oftentimes it's just like a few little techniques you can learn and you can save your voice, right?
I mean, I don't know about you. I don't want to say anything, but I worry about that. I worry
Mhm.
about not being able to sing and not
Yeah.
being able to play guitar
Hmm.
because of, any sort of repetitive stress or the issues that I've already had with my vocal cords. I worry about that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But obviously, I mean, the proper technique. Okay, so I think that I'm interested to know about your musical influences,
Hmm.
because you named a few pop artists, and by all means, you can share some pop artists. And do you still sing any pop or any other styles?
Oh, certainly. Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. I've
Okay.
always maintained that. Yeah.
So I actually just really enjoy like kind of like dishing about our favorite artists and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But I'm curious because it's not this any one of the styles that I particularly gravitate towards. So classical singing in general, I'm completely ignorant. So if you want to share some of those, then that'd be nice for me to be able to check them out afterward.
Oh,
Um,
sure,
yeah.
absolutely. So, you know, I really love a lot of the older recordings of
Hmm.
opera singers, like from the 50s, 60s, even a little bit before that sometimes. So, a couple of my biggest influences, there's Fiorenza Cossotto. So she was an Italian mezzo-soprano. Another
Hmm.
one is Ebe Stignani. I can always email you or text you
I think you
the
may have to.
the spelling of them. But I do find that from some of the older recordings, the technique has changed a little bit, like
Mm,
into modern times. And I prefer a little bit of like the old school technique from singers such as who I just mentioned, or Fedora Barbieri. That's another
hmm.
Italian uh, mezzo soprano, long dead, but
uh,
really fantastic voice. And then of singers that are alive, I would say that probably Elina Garancia. I don't know if you've heard of her name, but she's one of the most famous mezzo sopranos nowadays. Of course, in opera, like nowadays, like, there's very few people that are actually quote unquote famous, right? Because
mhm,
unfortunately, the art is a bit of a dying field. But in my the people that surround me in my operatic circle or classical music circle, like they would know who Elina Garancia is. And she was someone who really inspired me, like in my university days. Like I really wanted to emulate her. She also has a similar
mhm,
voice to mine. So it was
mhm,
someone that I could refer to when I was learning the traditional stuff.
mhm,
Yeah. So those I would say would be the biggest ones. If I think about more influences for the vocals only original music I do, then that would be like someone like Lisa Gerard. Are you familiar with her? She's like on a lot of
oh,
music or film score soundtracks.
oh yeah, yeah.
And so she was the voice on the Gladiator soundtrack.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So she was
Yeah.
like doing all the singing, like lower female voice. And I also have a lower voice too.
Yeah.
So when I first heard the Gladiator soundtrack, actually just by watching the movie, I just loved the music and the vocals of Lisa Gerard. Like it's just very inspiring. And she does like a bit of a she delves almost into classical technique, but not fully. Like so I find that kind of singer is the most inspiring like in the modern world, right? Because like we can't live in the past all the time. You have to kind of look forward and
Hmm.
try to figure out like what can you do to actually make a mark on the modern world and not just be an imitator.
Mm,
So which is also why I do my own music and I try
hmm.
to do original stuff like in concerts and so that it's not simply imitating music from like the 1800s.
This light is starting to bother me. So, um, those are cool. I actually would. Now I won't remember, but that's why we're on a podcast. But I probably would have to have you um, email or text me the names, and we'll put them in the show notes actually as well.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
But so something actually just popped up that I was curious about. So you said that the technique was
Hmm.
different from earlier. Can you tell me? I'm just now I'm curious about how it's different.
Yeah. And I speak specifically about classical technique. So
Yeah.
I feel that a lot of it has changed into like slightly airier sounds, perhaps slightly nasal rich sounds,
Hmm.
simply so that a singer can project over an orchestra. But I feel that that takes away a little bit from the main concept of bel canto. So have you ever
Hmm.
heard of that term, bel
I've
canto?
heard of
So
it,
it
but I don't know
literally
what it is.
in Italian, it literally means beautiful singing, bel canto. And the technique, there are like workbooks and things that classical singers today they can study from in order to learn bel canto.
Mhm.
And if you want to think about it simply, it's like a lot of the early Italian opera and classical Italian opera is where you're going to hear the most traditional bel canto technique. So Bellini, Rossini, and those are all techniques that require a lot of legato and really connecting the voice from note to note,
Mm.
and doing it properly.
Mhm.
But the other thing that it requires is also just beautiful open throat singing.
Mm.
So that, and I like to call it like a full circumference of resonance. So you're resonating in your throat, and then you also have the nasal and sinus resonance, but you don't want to only resonate in the sinuses and the nose, because then you get that nasal sound. It can be very pointed and not as rounded and as beautiful as it can be.
Mm.
So I suppose if I'm being totally honest, like what bothers me sometimes about the modern approach to teaching this style of singing is that the teachers and even the singers themselves, they really will like focus so much on that front sound in order to be super loud, and they don't focus enough about having enough of an open throat. And
Mm.
the reason why I believe is because when you have an open throat, you're a little bit more vulnerable. It's almost easier to send your resonance more into the nasal cavity because you're less likely to crack because the back of your throat is not as open. So if you keep it a little bit less open but send all the air pressure forward, then it's
Mhm.
easier to sing. But I don't
Mhm.
think it's the right thing to like do what's exactly easier if there's a technique where you can have a
Mm.
much better sound. I hope
Mm.
that makes sense what I'm saying.
It does make sense. I think we could probably talk about this for a long time because it's
Yeah.
something that I'm interested in because of my issues with my voice and losing my
Yeah.
voice. And I think um, this guy Per Bristow teaches a technique where quite a bit of the sound, I guess, but learning to put your vocal cords together also comes along with, I think, some more nasally voice
Hmm.
because because precisely if you're coming from a place where you already have maybe a potential injury or some irritation, it's a
Hmm.
lot easier on the voice to sing that way. But
Hmm.
perhaps you're right because like that it's just not as nice a sound. So then what do you do? Well, what's the point? It's not just about being easy to do.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, so don't get me wrong. So, and I don't talk about, I don't believe that you should make things difficult. It's just that the
Mhm.
technique itself, it's a little harder to learn in the beginning. But once you get the hang of like open the back of your throat, then it is actually very nice feeling, first of all, because you feel like this full circumference of resonance
Mhm.
as opposed to just being very front forward.
Mhm.
And it's something I teach also to pop singers too. So it's not just classical singers, but pop singers as well can be overly nasal. And then
Yeah.
there's always a balance, by the way. So you can be too far back in the throat for sure.
Yeah.
And then in classical singers, you hear like usually a very wide vibrato when that happens, like it's too wide.
Oh,
And then in
when it's
pop
too far
singers,
back.
it's too far back. And then in pop
Yeah.
singers, it's often too airy. You
Oh,
you
when it's
hear,
too far back, it's too airy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's always a balance, like for vocalists, no matter what kind
Yeah.
of style you're singing, there's always a
Yeah.
balance to find. Yeah.
I've been working on that with my own exercises where I've been doing them for a while now, probably a year, and I'm only just started to be able to move the sound forward and backward in my throat.
Yeah.
And actually, it's been kind of a mind-blowing experience because I didn't even think I could control my vocal cords at all. And
Yeah.
now being able to control the vocal cords, being able to feel where they're resonating, whether they're forward or backward, is also just been like a complete shock to me because I didn't think that I was ever going to get there. But
Hmm.
okay, so did you have anything else to say?
No, no, I think that's enough. Unless you have questions about it, then yeah.
No, I want to talk about your album now.
Mhm.
So the one that I listened to, I've actually been listening to it kind of nonstop for the last 2 days
Oh, thank you.
is Evocations.
Yeah.
Is that how you say it, or is it
Yeah.
Evocations? How do you say Evocations?
Evocations. It's because I found it that the music, the most comments I got was that it was evocative. So then I thought I'm gonna call it evocations.
I I have I'm sitting in a conference room in my office, I have an office job, so I have my headphones on pretty much all day. And I was just listening to it kind of on repeat for the past 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually I guess I agree. I actually never wanted to be this person, but because I like a lot of instrumental music. I'm actually I'm a huge jazz fan.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But jazz to me is not evocative, except certain music is associated with certain, I guess, cinematic themes.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it doesn't feel evocative to me.
Mm-hmm.
But your music actually does, now that you're bringing it up. And I didn't make actually didn't, I kind of just listened to it over and over again, but I didn't read the titles. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't look at the title of the album. I looked at the title of the album briefly, but then I just mostly was just like in this meditative state listening to it for 2 days
Mm-hmm.
straight. And there were definitely moments where I felt, there's lots of things that I'm curious about, but there were definitely moments where I actually was picturing actual real scenes of
Mm-hmm.
some sort. I can't recall, but it was cinematic in a way,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there were some certain elements and certain moments in the music where I was thinking, oh, this is like some dramatic scene in a movie or something. So it was actually literally evocative of something from time to time. I was also struck by it was like meditative in many ways, right? Many of the songs were just frankly meditative. They were there was a lot of them had drones, and then there were melodies going over, repeated melodies, other elements that were coming in. It's not rhythmic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was no pulse, steady rhythm in many of
Mm-hmm.
them, right? So it was like very meditative. Actually, it was great to just have on all the time, except that sometimes it was, kind of intense, a little bit. Um, so I'm actually just really curious about what made you make a record like this, and if there were specific things that inspired specific songs, that sort of thing. I'm particularly curious about that.
Yeah, so I was doing this project called Earth Singing during COVID because, of course, as you know, like everything was canceled. It was pretty horrible for most musicians. There's things that you worked on for like a year, two sometimes, and then it was just gone. So I had been developing like this project where I was going out into nature and recording myself sing live, but like in various natural locations. So some of them would be like quite echoey. You'd find these natural amphitheaters out in nature. So if you go like on top of a mountain, for example, sometimes I would like hike up a tall mountain, and then on the top I would just record myself singing whatever. And just to kind of get the effect of what the acoustic was like in this natural amphitheater. So it was like this little project I started, and it just started as little clips. But then during COVID, I started doing like full music videos. I had my friend record the piano part, and then I had it with an earbud in my ear, and I would go up into these wild locations and I would record these live music videos.
Yeah, I
And
was
then
going to
put
ask
them
about
together.
that because I noticed
Yeah,
that you were standing out on a cliff or something, or in a
exactly,
forest, but there was also accompaniment. So I
exactly,
knew there had
exactly.
to be some sort of something. Yeah.
collaboration, right? So my
Yeah.
and my friend recorded the piano, and then I would just mount the piano on top of the live recorded track, and then have like a full on music video. But while I was doing this, like I would tend to like warm up and just do my vocalizations like in these wild places, and I was just really inspired by like that natural acoustic and the sounds that the human voice makes, and that sort of evolved into creating like these full-on tracks where I would have an idea in my head. I would usually start with like either a melody or like a bass, kind of something that would create some sort of a pulse, and then I would just loop some of those and then
Mm.
start layering on top. And a lot of those tracks are totally improvised, so it would be like in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
I would just kind of come up with it as I went. And it was a very meditative experience for me. And a lot of the time I was also thinking like I want it to be a meditative experience for the listener. But then
Mm-hmm.
also there's a couple tracks, which probably the ones you mentioned, that are very intense. And that was actually done on purpose. So I had this vision in mind that like someone would be coming in for like a yoga like session where maybe they want to deal with some trauma or anxiety, let's say, and I would get them to like lie down and like listen to this track where first you have all this chaos with the sounds and like a lot of dissonance, and then by the end of the track there is a resolution, and I feel like it can be therapeutic actually.
Mm.
So I was actually very happy to hear what you were saying when you were listening to it, because I like to get feedback like that, because then I know I'm sort of on the right track of what I want to do with these pieces. Um, yeah. Don't know if I
I
got off track there a little bit, but
I no, I think that was great. I think I think that you're right though also about the aspect of having that tension and release.
yeah.
I'm just speculating, but I actually do think that there is an element where well, the first track is like a cacophony or something,
A
right?
bird song.
That
Yeah.
was it was certainly unsettling a little bit because it was like kind of like I don't know, just so there's definitely an emotional component and probably a
Hmm.
chemical component as well in your body as you listen to the songs.
Hmm.
And then when there is a release, because the very next song, I think, was also like, if I'm not mistaken, it was like a one to the four back and forth,
Hmm.
and it
Yeah.
was very harmonic, and it was very consonant.
Hmm.
And so there was a nice dichotomy there because the first song was like, oh gosh, I feel a little bit, a little bit like attacked a little bit. And then I was like, oh, no, oh, there's the resolution. Oh, yes. And of
Yeah.
course, I'm a sucker for plagal cadence. It's like for me,
Hmm.
I don't want to hear 5/1 because it just sounds it's like too much. It's just like the
Hmm.
one to the four is just so relaxing and so, I don't know. It's just like it feels spiritual to me or something.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Um, did you? So I also noticed there's actually there were two things. So some of them were kind of a little modal,
Hmm.
and I was curious if you had a specific like if you did that on purpose. And I wasn't listening so closely that I wasn't doing like active listening where I was like, oh, this one's in the a particular mode or that. But I did notice a few of them were
Yeah.
modal, and I was just curious if you did that at all on purpose, or was it just sort of like just by feeling or whatever came to you in that moment?
In all honesty, like most of it, I would say just like whatever came to me in the moment. So like I'm not overly thinking like, okay, I'm gonna do a 5/1 here or make it modal. However, I'm sure that there is influence of like chant, which would explain the modal stuff. I definitely am influenced by like throat singing, like Tuvan throat singing,
Yeah.
Tibetan monk chant, things like that. And then also even like very, very early classical music. So like from the like sacred music, like so um Christian monks chant, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there's influence in my head like that caused some of those modalities to happen.
Yeah, I was kind of hearing that, and actually, it brought something up again for me because I did listen to the entire album on repeat,
Hmm.
but actually, it's almost like the songs. I think we could dig a little deeper into them if we wanted to, and
Hmm.
find that each one is its own sort of, I don't know, each one is its own vibe. Let's just, to give it a very broad term. It was actually really effective for me. At first, I was just looping one, because they're actually kind of short, each one.
Yeah.
They're like tiny tone poems or something,
Hmm.
right? So if they were only a minute or two long, or even or something like that, you could just loop one of them.
Yeah.
And I did that. There were times when I just kept one on loop for a while, and
Hmm.
then it was sort of like put me into a space, and it was beautiful and meditative in that way. So
Yeah.
I almost feel like it's an album, but it's also like it can be used for some kind of, it's like functional in a way. I guess all music is functional,
Yeah.
but specifically it's like functional because it's it's so, I don't know, moody.
Hmm.
So you can just take one of these tracks, put it on a loop, and allow yourself to get into a mood from it,
Yeah.
which I thought
Yeah.
was
Exactly.
pretty neat.
Yeah, yeah. And that is like one of my intentions too. And like I mentioned earlier that I'd be interested in trying it like as a therapy for people.
Yeah.
Like especially some of the tracks, like the ones especially that have like a lot of dissonance and chaos, and then that resolve by the end of the track.
Mm-hmm.
And I might use that because I do this class, it's called vocal yoga for
Mm-hmm.
people that don't want to necessarily have like full on voice lessons, and it's like a group setting too, so you kind of feel safe in a group and you don't have to be put on the spot and like sing by yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
it's mostly like breath work, so like it treats a lot of anxiety issues in people, and then like just very simple vocalizing in a safe way where, and I show people how to like open their mouth properly and create a nice resonance. But in a group setting, so and then we do chanting together. So I was thinking to add into the class actually to have people lie down and like listen to one of those tracks,
Mm-hmm.
and just see like maybe do like a little guinea pig session, see how people feel with it, and if it's effective, then to maybe kind of bring that into my own practice, like teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds. I think that's a very like appropriate
Hmm.
thing to think of for sure, because it's definitely
Yeah,
useful in that way.
yeah.
Okay, so actually, before we move on, was there anything we missed about the album? Actually, well, I had one more question, but you go ahead if there was something you just thought of.
Yeah, yeah, so one thing, because you actually mentioned it, that you thought even of like cinematic stuff, and that is something like I forgot to mention, like I am like when I was young and like before I even started taking voice lessons, I was so influenced by like movie scores. And I was always, and especially Lisa Gerard, like I mentioned. So that's Hans Zimmer, the composer for
Oh,
the
it
Glad,
was. Yeah.
and he's done like so many different like film soundtracks, and I'd say he's probably like the most influential for me. I just like love his music and the atmosphere he creates with his music. So yeah, so that's also something that definitely influenced me. And I was also thinking of like scenes, I had scenes in my head as I was like improvising these numbers, and yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I could see that because it was like we discussed earlier. It was definitely cinematic in
Mhm.
some ways. What's your recording process for these?
So it started off very simple. I mean, I literally just had like my phone, and like when I first started, and I like decided to like loop a couple different like vocal tracks, and then I thought, hey, this sounds kind of cool. And actually, by the way, then it turned into that first track that I ever did was the Travel and Discovery chorus, which is on the album. So it was like
Yes.
actually the first one that I actually put together. I kind of glued the loops together and
Hmm.
I thought it sounded kind of cool. So then I sort of kept doing it every so often. And then it ended up that I had enough material to put an album together after about a year or so.
Oh.
Um, but yeah, where was I going with that again? Sorry, what was
Oh,
the
well, yeah,
question?
because it was the recording process
Right,
that I
right.
was
Okay, so I
curious.
started just simply on my phone, like just using like the voice recorder.
Yeah.
And then like I went a little bit further with I use an app called BandLab, which
I
is
have
really
heard
great
of
for
Band
like
Lab.
looping.
Yeah.
Yeah, BandLab. And you
Yeah.
can loop really easily, which is what I look for, of course, because I want to record and then loop stuff together. And you can
Hmm.
also add a little bit of reverb very easily. I also use Audacity and I use Ableton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever, now, well, just as we're chit-chatting, I always think of more and more things to ask you about, but have you ever considered putting any of this over, like, or introducing instrumental elements of any sort? Or actually, I did notice there were a lot of tonal elements to what you're doing. So there were times when your voice was emulating other, maybe not a specific instrument, but it was more instrumental for sure.
Mhm.
And then, and so that was part of it. But I guess I was curious that whether you were maybe contemplating introducing any sort of either more rhythmic elements or instrumental elements at all, or are you just going to do all voice?
So, well, right now, I guess that I call it vocals only. So right now, like I'm sticking to the voice,
Mm-hmm.
and I am trying absolutely like what you're saying, because I use even like super low parts of my voice. I
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of excess air actually, because you wouldn't be able to even phonate if unless I had excess air there. So I do that. Um, but yeah, more rhythmic elements for sure, but using the voice and maybe like snapping or clapping. But I kind of want to stick to like using my own body for it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe introducing some sounds from nature, like maybe crickets or water streaming through. But I kind of wanted to keep that natural aspect of like, this is just like me in nature and my natural voice and only my voice doing it. Now, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't collaborate like with people, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
there's like a
Yeah.
band or like a string quartet and we could do a collaboration,
Mm-hmm.
for sure, for sure. But it would be like, and even if I did it, like where I'm the main artist, and if there's like a string quartet behind me, then
Mm-hmm.
it would be like a different project, right? It wouldn't be
Of course.
the
Yeah.
vocals only original music. Yeah.
Um, I think that maybe you should pursue, if you're not already, um trying to get some of the tracks uh, licensed for film, because I could definitely see a lot of them
Hmm.
fitting over a lot of different types of scenes,
Yeah.
you know. Even repeated, there were a lot of points in time where I just thought, oh, this would be, there were times when it sounded actually actively like a movie score. Like there was
Hmm.
definitely a very powerful, visual that was inspired
Hmm.
by certain tracks. But of course, everybody's different. So maybe and the next person who listens to it might have certain tracks they're inspired by or whatever. But
Hmm.
I don't know if have you thought of that? Probably.
Well, so I do it like on the through CD Baby, like that's where
Oh
I
yeah,
released it. So
yeah.
it is technically like in the cloud where it could be found by
Right.
whoever, but I haven't like put the time into like seeking maybe an agent or someone like that that could actually help me put the music in front of the people that could really make it happen. So that's something, yeah, I want to do. That's hard though, like it's such a competitive field.
Yes.
Yeah.
I distribute through CD Baby as well, and they used to have a team that you could
Hmm.
reach out to and sort of pitch your stuff to them, and then they would go out and pitch your stuff.
Ah,
They used to have a great call-in service where you could actually speak to a human being and they were pretty knowledgeable, but I
hmm.
think that they've done away with that. So I think it's
Yeah,
all chat and email now, but they may still have the service.
yeah, yeah. Well,
And they have a
I'll look into that.
podcast too, where you can
Uh-huh.
call in and ask them directly on the podcast, and they'll answer your question on the show.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So, worst case scenario, you can call them out in public and ask them to do
Yeah.
it for you. Um, have you ever considered singing? So, just so people who haven't heard the record, there are no words.
No.
It's just vocalizations,
Yeah.
but there are no words. Have you considered using words?
Yes, I have. I have. Um,
Where are you on that?
I
This is all these are my curiosities.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I have written songs in the past, like but that was more for like voice and guitar, let's say, where I had like poetry ready and all that. I find that when I do this particular stuff, like words don't come as an inspiration. It's more like images and like scenes, and it's almost like I'm trying to reenact like a string orchestra with my voice kind of thing. But it's maybe something I would do. The poetry is, I would want the right words to come into my mind so that I don't, you know how like they are very evocative, the pieces, and people can kind of create their own scenes in their mind when they're listening to it. So I don't want to dictate like what someone is going to feel or see in their mind when they're listening to this particular music. But you never know how things evolve. Like maybe I will. Maybe I'll add words more. I am already working like on the next record, and I don't have anything with words just yet. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we're getting to the point in the podcast where I have to stop just going on tangents and asking you everything I'm curious about, and um, just ask a couple of like last important questions.
Hmm.
So the first thing is, oh, actually, before we move on from that particular record, was there anything else you wanted to talk about with that record?
No, no. I think we covered a lot,
Yeah,
and
we
I'm very
did.
happy that yeah, I'm very happy that you were interested in it and wanted to have me on. Thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to it. I just like, it was like, it got me into a real vibe for these past two
Hmm.
days that I feel like, I don't know, it became a part of my life for 2 days, in a way. So
Yeah.
it
Oh,
was nice.
great,
It was
great.
just
I'm
like,
so
I
happy to
was
hear
just
that.
feeling your vibe and just, and just, I don't know, just like letting the music influence me throughout my day, which I have the luxury of being able to do. So I'm, I guess, lucky to be able to do that, and then lucky that we connected.
Great, thank you.
So, what are you just said you're working on an album, but what other future music plans would you like to let me know and let everyone know about?
Well, so as you know, aside from doing this original music, I also am a performer, and I continue to do a lot of classical concerts, so a lot of recital work. I've also been really developing a bit of a like a music scene, I guess I would say, because there there isn't much of a classical music scene where I live, and that's in internal British Columbia. I live like in this tiny little mountain town. It's gorgeous there, and also very inspiring for what I do. So I love being there. But I was living in big cities like in the past, like Los Angeles, Boston, New York. So it's quite a big change. But anyway, so in a small town like that, like you often don't have much of a classical music scene at all, and I have to like drop.
We have a little one here where I live
Yeah.
in New York.
So, so I've been, yeah, New York is great. I mean, that's the place to be, especially for young artists, right? Like
Yeah, for
that are
young
starting out.
artists.
For me, like New York was a bit too chaotic, you know. So I am happy like being in a smaller town, but like the culture and the easy access to like perform and even audition for stuff. Like it's not that easy. So I've been building like my own thing there. I've been teaching a lot. I've been doing vocal workshops in group settings, and then also I've been like performing. And I found a pianist that drives 2 hours to come do performances with me, and we've been performing in the area. So hopefully we can do like a regular music series. We just did a performance last week, which went wonderful. We had a huge turnout, which was great. So that's something that I'm personally building. Like it means a lot to me to actually offer that kind of performance, and also the teaching I do, but the performance to a community like that doesn't really have access to it. So that's wonderful to do. So that's something I'm building. I've also got
Cool.
like other concerts coming up in various parts of Canada. Hopefully in the US, there's a couple things in talks. So maybe an opera in Los Angeles area and maybe a little
Cool.
tour of that. But we don't have exact details about that yet, so I can't really disclose it just yet. And other future plans, I guess, I'm also part of a summer music program and I'm starting my very own vocal program. I'm the first person to do it in this particular music program. It also in the mountains, not too far from where I live. So that's also something I'm developing. And yeah, I think that's about it. Just mentioned a
Cool.
few things. Yeah. So in the vocals only stuff, it's an
Right.
ongoing thing. You know, when I get inspired, I'm like in a meditative mood, let's say, then I take out my recorder and I start to improvise and see what I come up with.
Cool.
Yeah.
So when you, well, actually, just in general, if you're ever, uh, performing nearby,
Hmm.
let me think about this. Yeah, if you're ever performing in New York, let me know, obviously. But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
uh, since we have this relationship with Bard, um, you can always let me know or let them know directly, obviously, if there's something going on that you want people to know about in a particular city, because there's, we're all over the place. This has become like the
Mhm.
Bard podcast now.
Yeah. 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 I
um,
get the emails from the Bard alumni associations and
yeah, yeah. So they're good at promoting things. So, but and I'll love to know when the next record comes out.
hmm.
Of course, we could have you back on the show. I would be actually interested in collaborating um, maybe one day because I'm working on maybe a couple of singles that are kind of like rock and roll singles. But I was
Uh-huh.
thinking of doing a couple of versions of a song where they after the song is done, a part of the song loops for a long period of time, like
Uh-huh.
10 minutes, and it becomes like kind of like this meditative sort of jam thing. And I
Yeah.
think maybe, your style could potentially mesh with some of that. So we'll
Yeah,
we'll
sure.
we'll do that
Absolutely. Definitely
off.
let me know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll talk about that off camera. Um, and then, so okay, where can the last question, the most important question, of course,
Mhm.
is where can people find you? Your website. Well, and we put all the stuff, the links and everything in the show notes for people to find. But where can people find you? All your socials and your website and all that stuff.
Yeah, and you'll definitely need to put it down below because my name is very hard to spell. It's probably
Yes.
something, like a lot of actors and stuff, they actually change their names so that people can remember them easily, but nobody can remember my name
Yeah.
except Polish people.
Supposedly.
Uh, but
I
so
love. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah.
But I love
But
your
you,
name.
oh, thank you. Thank you.
I meet so many. I meet so many people from that area, and then when I hear them, they say your name is Nadia, and I say, oh, Nadia, okay, that's normal. But your really name is Nadezhda, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's so much more.
Why
I don't
don't you
know
go by
it.
that?
That
Right?
sounds so good. Like what? You know what I mean?
Well, when I first came to Canada and I was just in kindergarten, and I still remember this woman, she was also Polish, like she was kind of helping my parents around when we first arrived because none of us spoke English very well,
Yeah,
or at all. And she like brought me to the school and she was like, okay, we're going to change the name to Kathy.
yeah,
And then even though my name was Kasia is the short form of Katarzyna.
yes,
And so even like family members and so, they call me Kasia. And now, like, of course, all my friends, they call me Kasia.
right.
You can call me Kasia too, by the way.
Okay.
So, but she changed my name to Kathy, and I didn't have any say in that. And so for up until high school, actually,
Yeah,
I was known as Kathy, and it always never felt right. I was always like in my mind, like it just was not my name. And then when I
right.
got to high school, I just was like, I started introducing myself as Kasia,
Yeah,
and then just everyone called me Kasia instead of Kathy, which
yeah.
which wasn't me. So
I like
Katarzyna
how
is Catherine. It's
Katarzyna.
Catherine in Polish.
Say your name again. Katarzyna.
Katarzyna.
Katarzyna. Katarzyna.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that sounds so much nicer to me.
Yeah.
I like the sound of that. I I have a short story that I've been obsessed with. Uh, a Chekhov short story that I've been obsessed with
Ah,
since I
yeah, yeah.
was for a really long time, and I don't even know how the hell I stumbled upon it. I think it was assigned to me as a reading in high school. It's called The Little Joke,
Uh-huh.
and the girl's name is Nadenka,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just something so, I don't know, just cute and romantic about it, you know?
Yeah, they have cutesy forms of every name in
Yeah.
these Slavic languages.
Oh,
I think
right.
all the Slavic.
Right.
So you can call me Kashenka, for example.
Kashenka.
Yeah.
Forget. Okay, let's get off this subject because now this is too much for me. I'm going to start
Yeah.
to blush at this point.
Yeah. So anyway,
Say
so
your
you can find
socials,
my
your
social.
email, right? What? Not email, but your website,
Yeah. Yeah. If I give
socials,
my
all that
email,
stuff.
we can't get into the stories of the bad fans because I would not give my email out.
Well, there, yeah. We don't. You know
That's
what?
another.
We try to keep things very positive on this show.
Yeah, yeah, that's
There's no
another
bad
show.
mouthing. No, there's
I
no
have.
bad mouthing or of anything, and
Yeah.
we try to keep things as positive as possible.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm talking about like stalkers.
Oh, stalkers! Forget a
Yeah.
stalker. You have a stalker?
Oh, I had plenty. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah, yeah.
God.
But that's just if you're in any sort of like public thing, like you don't have to
Yes.
be like famous, you just
Yeah.
have like some kind of public image, then that's bound to happen, right?
Yes. Yes. So
Um,
let's move on from this. We don't
yeah.
want stalkers are no
So
good.
finally, my socials. So and it'll be spelled below, right? But it's always my full
Yeah.
name, like at, and then my Katarzyna Sadej. So it's KATARZYNA
Mhm.
and that's for Instagram. For Twitter/X, it's actually Mezzo Sunday. So Mezzo and then my last name. And I guess I'll send that to you, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm
So
gonna
you can,
put actual links so people will just
okay,
click on them. Yeah. It's
got
not
it,
gonna
got it.
be. Yeah.
And then Facebook, same thing. It's at Katarzyna Sunday, my whole name.
Yeah.
Uh, and then what else is there? Am I missing something? Instagram, Facebook, X,
Facebook, X, um,
and then my
your
website,
website.
which is just www.mynamefulname.com.
Good.
Yeah.
And your stuff, I streamed it on iTunes. I saw
It's
it's on all the streaming
everywhere.
platforms. So
It's on
okay.
all streaming platforms. You can find it on YouTube Music,
Great.
Amazon Music,
Oh,
and it's always if you search for my full name, like it will come up, and the album is called Evocations.
got it. Yeah. Well, and we'll put your YouTube as well.
Oh yes, YouTube
Right.
as well.
That's super important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So this was wonderful. Thank you so much. It was really a
Thank you.
pleasure to have you on the show. I tell every guest that, it's like makes my life and my job of doing this podcast so easy when we have, lovely, interesting people to come on. So I appreciate you for putting yourself out there And yeah, so we look forward to your future endeavors and having you back on when you're ready and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right.
Bye, Kasha.
Bye.